So some of the more observant of you will have noticed that our keynote speaker has changed very much at the last minute. There are many things brought about by the general election that will affect us all. One of them I didn't think was going to be the availability of our keynote speaker, who apparently couldn't turn up today because of PERDA. So we apologise for the late change, but we have managed to make that late change literally at the 11th hour. And I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Graham Cluley. Graham has been working in the security industry for a number of years, and he's worked as a programmer and was actually involved in writing some of Dr. Solomon's antivirus toolkit for Windows, which some in the room will probably remember. I don't know about fondly, but probably remember. And subsequently he's been employed in a number of senior roles at Sophos, and where he founded the Naked Security blog. So we thank Graham for his last-minute stand-in attendance, and I'd like to introduce him to the stage for our keynote today.
Thanks very much. Yeah, that's hilarious, isn't it? Yeah, I wrote a piece of software 25 odd years ago, and I'm still getting flack about it. So so I'm sorry if you got a general protection fault on your Windows 3.1 computers all the way back then. I'm no longer able to answer those support queries. But wow, what a way to make someone uncomfortable when they get on stage. No, that's brilliant. Yeah, well, thanks first of all for coming along and giving me the opportunity to speak today. As we mentioned, it was a bit last minute. What I wanted to do was talk to you a little bit about what's going on out there, some of the threats which you might be facing, and hopefully share some practical advice, things which you can be taking back to your organisations in order to better protect them as well. And as Nigel says, I've been working in the computer security industry for 25 years now. Started off writing antivirus software, moved into product management, and ended up talking about it. Now I run my own blog and do podcasts about computer security. So computer security, I've sort of lived and breathed it for some time. And it's interesting because over that time, one of the things which I found is that people keep making the same mistakes. History is repeating itself over and over again. Today is May the 5th. Yesterday was May the 4th. As all Star Wars fans know, May the 4th be with you. But the reason why May the 4th sticks in my mind is because of a virus called the love bug, or I love you. Who was working in IT when the love bug spread around? Yeah, oh, loads of you greybeards. Yeah, so 17, that was, I don't want to make you feel even older, 17 years ago that was. Quite astonishing, isn't it? But some of the techniques which that used are still being used today, and the problem is essentially that people aren't being upgraded. And here's a problem. Here's a user called John, and he has received an email which appears to have come from Google. Hi John, someone just used your password to try to sign into your Google account. It gives some details, and it says, we've noticed that they've tried to log in from the Ukraine. Google stopped this sign-in attempt. You should change your password immediately, which is a kind of helpful message Google can give you, warn you if there's been some suspicious activity. And to John's credit, he forwarded it to his IT support team and said, hey, this sounds worrying. What should I do about this? Right? Maybe these are the kind of emails you get from your users as well. And so it went to the IT support team, went through a woman called Sarah, who passed it on to Charles in IT support, and he replied saying, this is a legitimate email. John needs to change his password immediately and ensure that two-factor authentication is turned on into his account. You can do this by going to this link. All very sensible advice, or so you think. Unfortunately, the IT support guy's just made a very simple error. He fumbled when he typed that. Because if you look at the actual email, which is what John did was he took that email, and rather than using the link offered to him directly to Google, he saw the message which said, this is a legitimate email. And he thought, oh, it'd be easy. I'll just click on the reset password link inside the email here, the change password one. That's what he did. And that link actually went to a bit.ly shortened URL, didn't go to the real Google at all. And so his Gmail credentials were phished. Simple as that. All because the IT support guy should have said, this is an illegitimate email. rather than this is a legitimate email. Mistake happened. And now the bad guys have got his Gmail password, which means that they can log in to his account. They can read his communications. And you can scour through those communications, and you don't just find out, him chatting with his wife or whatever. You also sometimes stumble across emails like this. Here's one of the emails which the bad guys found, where he asked someone, can you remind me what my Apple ID password is? And they said, yeah, sure, I can help you with that. This is your email address, and this is your password. So now the bad guys have got his Apple ID password as well, which means that you could log in to John's Apple ID account. Here we are, I've done that. Well, I didn't do it, but someone else did it. Logged into it, and you can see he hasn't got two-step verification turned on. Naughty, naughty. Should have done that for better security. And now people can meddle with his Apple account too. And he's reused that password. Remember that dumb password, runner4567? Not a very good password, is it? Well, he's also made the cardinal sin of reusing it. And he used it on his Twitter account. And this is what they tweeted. I've switched teams. Vote Trump 2016. Now, if you haven't already twigged, this isn't just any ordinary John. This is John. This is the guy whose email account got hacked. And he works, or was working until December 9th last year, for this woman here, Hillary Clinton. He was the chairman of the Democratic campaign to get Hillary Clinton elected. Someone had decided and targeted John Podesta to get hold of his emails. And when they got hold of his emails and his communications and all the rest of it, they didn't just use that to make money. They weren't really interested in making money. What they did was they shared that with a website you may have heard of called WikiLeaks. And you can go to WikiLeaks right now, and you can search all of John Podesta's emails. His personal, private emails, all manner of communications, work-related emails as well. All, thank you very much, Julian Assange. Sorry, I've been a little bit sick in my mouth. Because you've now breached this guy's privacy, you've exposed all this information, and you've opened him up to criminals. Because other people went to WikiLeaks and they found John Podesta's runner4567 password, which meant even after John Podesta knew his Twitter account had said that he was now voting for Trump, which was obviously a little bit of mischief, people carried on logging into his Apple ID. And if you log into an Apple ID and you're a little bit of a mischievous hacker, what's the first thing you do? You wipe the guy's iPhone remotely. And you're not the only one doing it. Dozens of people around the world were thinking, that sounds funny. I'll just log in and wipe his iPhone. So you must imagine, oh, here goes my iPhone again. It's wiping itself again, over and over again. All because he received a phishing email, and he actually didn't do anything that bad, because he forwarded it to the IT support team. And it was the IT support team whose communication wasn't entirely clear as to how he should respond. And what's the outcome of all of that? Well, the outcome is Donald Trump is president. Well, we don't know that this is the only reason Donald Trump is president, but it's certainly not a great day in the office. Actually, it's not going to be a great 4 years, I suspect, in the office. Just takes one member of staff to have their email hacked, for your organization to be compromised, for the hackers to begin to spread laterally throughout your organization, for your organization to be brought into disrepute. Can be very, very damaging. And these kinds of mistakes, these sort of errors are happening all the time. And sometimes they're not just happening. I mean, the Democratic Party aren't a huge organization in terms of the committee. They're not a vastly powerful organization like Google or Facebook, for instance. And you would never, ever imagine that a scammer would be able to use email to con these sort of oh dear. So it's just been revealed in the last week or so that Google and Facebook lost $100 million through scams, through email scams. What happened was this. A company was set up by a guy. He set up a company in the name of one of Google and Facebook's suppliers. He actually set up a company with the same name, but he set it up in Malta rather than where those companies were actually properly based. And then he contacted Google and Facebook and he said, oh, I'm just invoicing you for this work, which I've done nothing. By the way, our bank details have changed. And the people in the finance department just updated their records, which meant that every future invoice which was coming to those companies was going to him. And he ended up making £100 million out of both of them. So there's a lot of scams which are taking place and potentially could affect your organization, and the crux is often some sort of human element going wrong, something like that which is making a mistake. And it can be kind of depressing that this sort of thing happens. And I thought, well, okay, how are we going to start the cybersecurity? How are we going to start this IG day to day? What we should do just to get to know each other is I should share something personal. Because I've worked in the industry for a long time, and one of the things that we were taught was that all virus writing is bad and all hackers are evil and, you know, bad guys, right? You even sang those sort of things in the shower, the industry song in the shower every morning as you're scrubbing yourself down with soap and a loofah. And maybe you do that as well for your different organizations. I don't know, your different universities. Maybe you are singing the company mantra or the sea shanty. Well, now I'm independent, which means I can tell you the truth. And there are some viruses which I sneakily have some regard for. And I wanted to show you my favorite virus of all time. It's called Casino. It comes from the island of Malta. There's a connection in itself. And it's also known as Disk Destroyer. That's the virus is also known as Disk Destroyer, not Malta. I have just destroyed the file allocation table on your disk. However, I've kept a copy in memory. I'm giving you one last chance to restore your precious data. Warning, if you reset now, all your data will be lost forever. And this is my favorite virus of all time. It's an old DOS-based virus, but I wanted to show you it because it can make an important point. It's asking you to think of a number between 1 and 10. And if you get the number right, you will get your data back. If you get the number wrong, you've got an expensive data recovery on your hands. Because the file allocation table, as you may know, is the thing which remembers where all the files are on your hard drive, what sectors they're in. If you lose that, it's a bit like the Morecambe and Wise sketch of Andre Previn. All the notes are there, but not necessarily in the right order. So it's complicated. It's like a jigsaw which is spilled out everywhere, you know, putting it all back together. Nightmare. So let's play the game. Huddle up. Who's going to press number 1? Oh, sorry, I should have done a test first of all. Have you all got arms? Can everyone who has an arm, at least one arm, put it up? Put it up? Yes? Okay, so there's no physical reason why you can't participate. Don't worry, I'm not going to bring you on stage. I'm not going to humiliate you or read out your social security number or anything like that. Who's going to press number 1? Sorry, let's try that again. Has everyone got an arm? Who's going to press number 1? Thank you, otherwise it's going to get socially awkward. Who's going to press number 2? Bearing in mind nothing bad happens to people who press number 1. Very good. Number 3? Good. Number 4? Excellent, you're getting the hang of this. Number 5? Interesting. Number 6? Number 7? It's interesting. If you say number 7 in that sort of Derren Brown way, you get more people putting their hand up. Number 8? Number 9? Number 9, number 9, number 9. Number 10? Technical support. He's pressing the 10 button. It's a good job you're at the back. Not many people saw who did that. Who's going to do the Vulcan nerve pinch, Control Delete? Anybody? No? Good, because it intercepts that keyboard interrupt and displays a message saying, ha ha, say bye to your balls. Who's going to turn off their computer? Big red switch? Yeah, maybe. Oh dear, it wasn't lying. It has only kept a copy of it in memory, so you've just lost all your data. Who's going to sit there like a lemon and do nothing? Most of you. Who is going to call someone like me or your favorite antivirus company and ask us, what do we do? What do we do? Who's going to do that? Yes, correct answer. Do you know what we're going to say to you? Think of a number between 1 and 10. Because it's random, it changes. We don't know what the answer is. Now, the reason why this is my favorite virus of all time is sometimes, yes, you get the number right and you get your data back. Quite often, you get the number wrong and you lose your data. But every now and then, you get the number right and it says, yeah, you got the number right, but I'm going to shag your hard drive anyway. And that just appeals to my sense of humor. I just think that's funny. But you probably don't. The point is, prevention is better than cure. You want defenses in place. You want to be prepared. You don't want to be playing Russian roulette with your hard drive. And similarly, you don't want something like this to pop up. Tesla Crypt. How many of you have seen ransomware? Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? Maybe you've seen this one. There's many different strains of it. Tesla Crypt, ransomware, encrypting your files, demanding that you send a Bitcoin payment for the safe recovery of those files. you need to have backups, and you need a way of ensuring those backups haven't been meddled with and, you know, are in proper state for recovery, so you can recover from them. No one likes paying the criminals, right? And your organisations don't have a limitless pot of money to pay for this kind of thing. I can understand why sometimes you have to make a pragmatic business decision and say, well, you know what, let's pay the few £1,000s to get the money back. It doesn't leave a nice taste in the mouth, but please put in backup in place and have defences in place to reduce the chances of a successful ransomware attack, to prevent that from succeeding in future. Because the ransomware can be pretty nasty. Here is Jigsaw, for instance. What it says is that every hour it will start deleting your files. So not only is there a ransom, but there is a time limit. They are going to start shooting the hostages unless you give in to their demands. Not very pleasant at all. There is even ransomware for Android, which might lock up your users' devices and claim that they've been visiting naughty websites, and that can be a real nuisance to try and get rid of. There is ransomware like Popcorn Time. Popcorn Time, it has the traditional model of asking you to pay a Bitcoin ransom, but also it has its nasty way of helping you get your files back. And what it says is, okay, look, you don't have to pay us anything, but do you mind infecting a few more people with our ransomware? And if you use our affiliate link to infect other people, we'll know when they've paid up, and then we will give you your files back. So you're now a member of the ransomware gang. Pretty dirty tricks. And there's even, you know, what's the point of this? There's even Star Trek-themed ransomware now. It's ransomware, Jim, but not as we know it. We've seen attacks more recently where the attackers in the UK have been targeting educational establishments. And what they do is, rather than just spam out the ransomware or email it out, they actually start the attack with a phone call. They phone up the school or the educational establishment, claiming to be from the Department of Education, saying that there's, saying that we need the name of the head teacher or the finance administrator. Say we have to send some guidance forms. They have to be filled in for the government, sensitive information. Can you let them know that this email is coming and make sure that they act upon it? They're actually making that phone call first, and then they send it through. And then, of course, someone's expecting it, thinks, oh, crumbs, and more paperwork and red tape for our organisation to deal with. They click on it, and bam, they've been infected by a ransomware-infected Word document or Excel spreadsheet, which has been booby-trapped. So the malware has evolved. It's gone from being mischievous, which is sort of when I entered the industry, to being all about money. It's largely about money. It's not entirely about money, but it's largely about money these days. And the money which can be made through these attacks can be considerable. So here we've got a number of examples. For instance, hospitals, just like educational establishments, often aren't incredibly well funded in terms of their IT infrastructure, not as well funded as we would like. And so there have been hospitals who've been hit time and time again by ransomware, sometimes meaning that their computers are down and they have to postpone operations, or they're running around with clipboards and pieces of paper rather than being able to look up people's medical records online. And we even saw the San Francisco Metro being hit by a ransomware attack recently. Hit all their ticket machines, means they couldn't sell any tickets. Now, I really liked their response. What they did was they just opened up the ticket barriers, said everyone can ride for free. And they had a backup, so they didn't end up agreeing to the ransom author's demands. But terrible, terrible things can happen. Oh, yes. And something quite unthinkable happened in Washington earlier this year, which was the CCTV cameras which were covering Donald Trump, the highly respected Donald Trump's inauguration. The CCTV cameras, they found just a few days before, had been infested with ransomware. So it's not just infecting regular computers, it can affect and impact the Internet of Things as well. And they found themselves having to clean up tens of thousands of devices. Over 70% of the public surveillance cameras in Washington were infected because they hadn't been properly patched. There wasn't an updating infrastructure. The Internet of Things, man, it's just a nightmare, isn't it? Now, you can end up thinking that all the bad guys are geniuses, but they're not. This guy doesn't know how to change a light bulb, for instance. These guys don't know how to use the thermostat. This guy is so worried about his webcam getting hacked that he's forgot to put his gloves on when using the keyboard to prevent fingerprints. Some of the bad guys do make, I mean, joking aside, they do make big mistakes. I spoke earlier about the love bug, which spread 17 years and 1 day ago. This is the guy who wrote it, Onel de Guzman. If you listen to my podcast, we just did a great in-depth talk all about the I love you worm. What people forget about the love bug was it wasn't just forwarding itself to everybody in your address book claiming to be a love letter. It also attempted to steal your internet usernames and passwords. It was actually written originally. He conceived it as a college project. He wanted to submit it as a college project. So he put together a proposal saying, I'm going to write something which gives people cheaper internet access. And his professor said, what a marvelous idea. And then like a typical student, he said, yeah, I'm going to do it by writing a virus which steals stuff. It's like, oh, you can't do it. So they didn't let him submit it as a project. He released the virus anyway. But then he infected 50-odd million computers around the world, all of which were sending him their username and password. And he's in Manila, in the Philippines, in the year 2000. What do you think his internet connection's like? It's worse than Virgin Media. It's that bad. So he's effectively denial of serviced himself. Horrendous. Yeah, if only he'd, stuck to a couple of yogurt pots and a piece of string, he'd been better than Virgin. And then he had his mate, Michael Bowen. He wrote a word macro virus. Michael Bowen went to the same college in Manila. And he had a virus which occasionally popped up like, I don't know if you remember Clippy, of course. Yeah, Clippy. Well, sometimes Clippy wasn't Clippy. Sometimes he could be Albert Einstein and other characters as well. And Michael Bowen's virus would pop up messages from the Mikado or quotes from Doctor Who and things like that. But at the end of the month, it would take over your printers, which were typically dot matrix back in the day, and it would start printing out this message saying, warning, if I don't get a stable job by the end of the month, I will release a third virus. Nasty. And it will remove all the folders in your primary hard disk, or in layman's terms, parako naring phenomat ang hard disk mo, which is Tagalog for I'm going to shag your hard drive. But not just that. What makes him genius and what gives him, in my mind, the accolade, the ultimate accolade of the dumbest malware author of all time, was that he then printed out his CV, his name, address, contact details. Brilliant. Now, actually, he got away with it because there weren't any computer crime laws in the Philippines. So the president of the Philippines was saying about the guy who wrote the love bug, and this guy saying, isn't this fantastic? These guys, what an example of Filipino youth, not Americans. These are the guys who are going to lead us into tomorrow. Horrendous. So the bad guys aren't geniuses because they don't need to be, because we make it too easy for the cyber criminals to succeed. Now, I'm not going to teach you how to suck eggs about the common ways in which people get infected. You know it as well as me. Email attachments coming on. Users clicking on the attachment without thinking. Here's an email which claims to have been sent from my photocopier, for instance. I don't have a photocopier. Why is it sending me emails? Saying, hey, Graham, why don't you believe in me? If I click on the Word document, I get infected. Here's another one, claiming that I've flown on American Airlines or I've paid with my credit card for something. And your users see red. And the mist comes over them and they can't resist. And they get that twitchy little mouse finger. Oh, must not click. Oh, but it says Jennifer Lopez naked. Oh, that's dated me, hasn't it? Must not click, must not click. And they click and bam, they've been hit, of course. And typically what they will see today is something like this. They open the booby-trapped Word document, and it's using some social engineering, because Microsoft woke up to this threat. Having built this ghastly macro language into Office products, they then realized that the bad guys were exploiting it. So they thought, oh, well, maybe we better, warn people. So they put up this little yellow bar at the top saying, security warning, macros have been disabled. When your users read that, do you know what they read? No. They read arfle, barfle, gloop, wibble, wobble. Because it's all gibberish. They don't understand a word of that means. Your users are like cavemen. Your users just see these error messages and they want them to disappear. So they just bang the keyboard randomly, any button they see, until that irritating message disappears so they can get on with their work. This Word document has this great big graphic at the top, which the bad guys have put there, saying, enable the content to allow us to run our virus on your computer. And the user says, well, it's in a nice font. It has a Microsoft Word icon. I'll do that for it. and off it goes. And so you get infected. That's email attachments. Then, of course, there's email links. Bad guy puts malware on websites, sends you an email containing a link to somewhere malicious. So here's one. It claims that you just purchased something, view the receipt, and your users go, oh, how dare they? And if they haven't kept their computer patched, or if they're not running up-to-date antivirus, or if it's a zero-day exploit, just visiting that web page may silently infect the computer with a drive-by download. Rather nasty. And then there are watering holes. So your users, I don't know what your users are into, but they're probably into all manner of things, right? So imagine they're into role-playing games or something like that, or dressing up as, what am I going to say? Dressing up as middle-aged tribesmen or something and going into the forest, historical reenactments. If someone wanted to target that group, they don't necessarily email all of them, they just infect the website where those sort of people congregate. So they poison the watering hole, and that's how people get hit. Here, for instance, is a Georgian news website covering Georgian political news. Who on earth would possibly want to infect Georgian politicians? Hard to imagine, isn't it? Let's speculate. Let's give them a name, because we don't know who the adversary is. Let's call them the Ruskovians, for instance. Okay, so imagine the Ruskovians wanted to infect Georgian politicians. They infect a website like this. This is written, by the way, in Georgian. This isn't Klingon, which you're looking at up here. And they have injected into here a malicious script, which executes when people go to the website. They instantly get infected. These sort of attacks we see all the time. And then there's malvertising, huge problem. And I'd be interested to hear what you are doing about malvertising. So many websites are trying to fund themselves with advertising, but the problem is that adverts not only track you, they not only invade your privacy, but they are also, in some cases, designed to infect computers with malware or spyware or unwanted applications or adware. And so you are reading a news website, like, for instance, Forbes, and you have these sort of irritating messages, interstitial pop-ups before the actual news article, and it displays some adverts. Forbes actually now pops up a message if it detects you're running an ad blocker, saying you should disable your ad blocker because you're stopping us from displaying our adverts. Unfortunately for Forbes, a year or so ago, their software which detected the ad blocker actually got infected itself. And so the thing which was telling you to turn off your ad blocker was actually infecting your computer. So it wasn't the greatest advert for turning off ad blockers. I'd recommend generally that people do keep ad blockers. I wish these sort of messages said something like this instead. I think ad blockers are a really good thing to protect people's privacy and their security. And it's up to the advertisers to produce attractive adverts that don't irritate, don't invade our privacy, don't destroy the security of our computers, and then I will turn ads back on in my browser, because I've had enough. And maybe this week you saw an attack like this. This happened just this week. You may have received an email like this. Over 1.5 million people received an email like this on Gmail, saying something quite ordinary. Blah, blah, someone's name, may even be someone you know, has invited you to view the following document. Open in Docs. It looked just like one of those emails you get when someone shares a Google Doc with you, okay? And when you click on it, you get a screen like this. This isn't being taken to a phishing site. This is Google's URL. And it's saying, hey, Google Docs wants access to your email. You've probably guessed, because we're in the middle of a security presentation, this isn't good news. Because this isn't the real Google Docs. In their wisdom, how can I rephrase that? In their lack of wisdom, Google allowed any old Charlie to create third-party apps which had names like Google Docs. So they could then send you a message and try and trick you into authorizing the fake Google Docs to attach to your Gmail account. And if you clicked on that link, you were then running code, and part of the code, this is part of the code, would actually forward that message to everyone else in your address book. This was just like the love bug, happening again 17 years after the original love bug, spreading around. And people were getting hit by this, and this isn't a new technique. This is a technique which has been used for some time by state-sponsored attackers. This week's attack was really high profile, and I think it's woken Google up that they need to do more about these sort of attacks. But we've seen state-sponsored attacks like this, for instance, where people have received messages which claim to be about something called Google Defender. So they're saying, hey, you can improve the security on your account. And when you go to the page, again, look, it's a real Google URL. It's saying, yeah, we just want to access your Drive. We want to be able to access your Gmail as well. And people will approve this if they've fallen for the right social engineer. And these particular state-sponsored attacks, they were using names like Google Docs, Google Defender, Google Email Protection, Google Scanner. It wasn't just a Google problem. We also saw it against Yahoo, Delivery Service, McAfee, Email Protection, all completely fake. So some of the webmail providers, some of the cloud services are not doing enough to protect your users from making what's an understandable mistake, where they're hovering their mouse over the link and they're saying, oh, this really does go to a real Google URL. And they don't know that behind the scenes, they're actually giving access to a third party to their account rather than the real Google, for instance. And thus you get infected. So these are things to be watching out for. And this, as I said, is brand new this week, the attack which happened against about 1.5 million people. So how are firms getting targeted? Let's quickly run through how that can happen. So here is maybe someone in your finance department. He has a couple of kids and they're going to school. And if he's anything like me, I've got a young child. My son goes to school and my wife's saying, Graham, can you stop being so antisocial? Can you please make friends with the other parents? Because it will help our son make friends and all the rest of it. And it's like, I can't remember their names. I don't know who's responsible for which kid. And she says, you know what you've got to do? Again, I felt a little bit ill. She meant I had to create a Facebook account and friend people on it. People I didn't really know. So that's what this guy did as well. So he's on Facebook, and maybe he's liked something from one of his friends, and he hasn't set his privacy settings properly, which means that the bad guys are able to determine where his kids go to school. This is how they're targeting organizations. Because, of course, the school has a website, and the website, maybe it's running something like WordPress, maybe the plugins haven't been updated, maybe there's a vulnerability, maybe there's a SQL injection vulnerability. Who knows what? All we know is school websites typically are not like Fort Knox. There are quite often vulnerabilities there. And so the bad guy is able to plant a malicious PDF file onto the school website. And then he just sends an email. Sends an email to the guy he's targeting, forging the email so it appears to come from the head of the school. All information which is public accessible. And of course, email isn't secure, as we all know. If email was created tomorrow, nobody would use it. It would be laughed out of the room. But email's been around for everyone. We all use email. But anyone can pretend to be anybody if they like. So he sends an email claiming to be the head teacher, saying there's been an outbreak of rickets at the school. And if you want to know what we're doing about it, please click on the link and find out. And the poor old user thinks, oh, my kids do go to that school. And that is an email from the head. And if I hover my mouse over the link, that does go to the school website. So, of course, he's going to click on the link, because he's worried about rickets, or whatever. And as a consequence, the malicious PDF drops the Trojan horse onto his computer. The computer is now owned. It can steal information. It can see everything that's going on the computer screen. And it can spread laterally throughout the organization, or as we know it inside IT, kaboom. It's happened. So, like I said, I don't think he did that much wrong. There's not much more you would really expect from a user. You know, it's up to us then to keep systems up to date, to have systems in place to look for buffer overflows and 0 days and prevent those sort of attacks. This is the joke we often see from IT, is PEBCAC, probably, you know, it's the human sitting in the chair between the chair and the keyboard. Here's a visualization of that. This is Dido Harding, Chief Executive of TalkTalk. Well known, she's a member of the House of Lords, married to a Tory MP. She's escaped with her job intact. They had a SQL injection attack on their website, very high profile. It was actually, I think, the third data breach which had occurred to TalkTalk in the space of a year. You know, it's embarrassing to happen once, but to keep on having data breaches is pretty bad. SQL injection attacks, despite what they said when they called it a sequential attack, if you ever remember that news report. It's not rocket science. Those are sort of threats which have been around for 15, 20 years. It's the sort of thing you learn on Web Security 101. And I'm sure the IT security team at TalkTalk knew there were problems and there were threats which they had to deal with. I suspect, however, that the management were not taking them seriously and were thinking, why are you wasting time doing that rather than building X, Y, Z, which is going to be more visible and better for our customers. But SQL injections are bugs that are so simple a 16-year-old could exploit them, or in the case of TalkTalk, a 15-year-old. So when people get frustrated with you guys in the IT department, what they do is they set up their own sort of secret IT departments, and that's where the problems can really begin to emerge. One of the attacks which we've seen has seen people who've set up MongoDB databases, for instance, servers which are openly visible to the outside world, which haven't got proper protection in place, and so the hackers are able to use tools like Shodan, which can search the internet looking for vulnerable devices attached to the internet and ways in which they can access them. And you have your database up there online, the bad guys get in, what do? They wipe your database, it's gone, kaput. And they leave behind a message, it's rather like ransomware really, saying if you want your data back, you have to pay this many bitcoins. There's no guarantee, though, that you actually will get your data back. I suspect in many of these cases they haven't even bothered taking it. What we even saw were rival gangs of hackers finding these vulnerable servers with the databases, seeing other people's ransom messages, and then deleting the previous ransom message and putting their own one there instead, in the hope that they would be able to make some money. So, and it's not just, by the way, MongoDB. It's also been, Redis, CouchDB, Cassandra, etc., where this has been happening. But your users are struggling to cope with this. And they're also struggling to recognize that an attack can really happen in the blink of an eye. When I started in the computer security industry, there were 200 new computer viruses every month. Some of you guys would have received your updates for the software I was writing every 3 months on a floppy disk, sent you via the Royal Mail. If you're really paranoid, you might have got a monthly update. If there was an outbreak of something, we could actually fax you an update which you could type in, or we could even read it to you down the phone. Crazy days. Today, 400,000 new pieces of malware being seen every 24 hours. It's hard to visualize, isn't it? So think of it this way. It's 1 every 0.4 seconds. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. A conveyor belt of cybercrime coming out. Loads and loads of malware, most of it designed to compromise your computers, hijack them, steal information, spy on you. 0.4 seconds, according to Google, or DuckDuckGo, is the blink of an eye. So that's one of the big problems, is this pure glut of malware and trying to protect against it. Another threat, though, is there is a threat posed by those people who aren't even capable of writing malware. And there's this threat of business email compromise. And this has been one of the biggest growing threats. Alongside ransomware in the last year or so, huge amounts of money have been lost through business email compromise. It works like this. The criminals pretend to be one of your executives of your organization. They contact a junior member of staff, maybe in the finance department, and they say, can you move some money into this bank account? And people do it. I'm sure when people press the transfer button, they might go, I wonder if I should have done that. But they do it because they've been socially engineered. Sometimes the emails will be followed up with a phone call as well. And if you don't know the boss, or if you're not comfortable saying no to the boss, and let's face it, most of us don't like saying no to the boss in this day and age, you may well just do it without thinking. And the consequences can be large. And when I talk about this, sometimes people think, well, how big a problem can this be? But it can be quite significant. The way in which they find out who the right people are inside your organization is that there is a website which the criminals love, which is devoted to collecting information about your organizations. And you know what? My guess is that you and your colleagues are probably in it right now. It's called LinkedIn. If you want to get details of who's in your organization and who works where and who the new recruits are, who are the ones who might be vulnerable? Who are the ones who you could, if you were a criminal, you could contact and say, hello, it's HR here. We'd just like you to log in to the HR portal using your usual username and credentials via this link, Who are those people who are vulnerable to these sort of attacks? I went on LinkedIn because I figured, you know, rather than targeting CEOs, what about if we targeted the personal assistant to the CEO instead? Because the PAs, let's face it, know more about the organization than the actual real boss. Because they see everything. And they hear everything. All the things which the big boss is never told. And they know when the boss's spouse has a birthday. They know their home address. They know their credit card details. They know their travel movements. They know everything. PAs, most powerful people inside the organization. I looked on LinkedIn. I looked for PAs to the CEO in London. And I came up with 846 results. All potential targets if I wanted to scam a particular company. So let's look at some of the attacks which have happened like this. $5 million was lost by Ryanair through one of these email scams. Not malware, just simply emailing saying, can you move some money into a Chinese bank account? $5 million is almost as much as I spent when I travelled on Ryanair because I took an extra suitcase. Thank you. Leone lost $44 million. $55 million was lost by this aerospace manufacturer as well. And sometimes they're after HR information as well. So they may actually not be after money and transferring money. They're just after sensitive information from your organization. Now, I realize you are working in a challenging environment. Okay? It's difficult for you because you have to balance the openness of your organization where lots of different people are coming in versus the security, the sensitive information also which you're storing, the intellectual property. It's not just student files which you may be trying to protect. And that's why we need defense in depth. We need patching and antivirus and firewalls and application control and data leakage prevention. And you know about those things. You understand about the need for strong user authentication, for people to prove that they are who they really say they are if they're logging in remotely. You need to start encrypting by default, rather than the decision be, you know, should we encrypt this data? The discussion should be, is there any reason why we shouldn't encrypt this data? So if a breach does happen, at least you've got the safety blanket of saying, well, at least the data was gobbledygook. They'll have a hard time trying to work out what it was. Things like the cloud are obviously a risk because sometimes, well, you're just trusting someone else. So you need to have confidence that they are taking security as seriously as you. And sometimes the manufacturers and the people supplying stuff to you are a danger as well. IBM this week have put out a warning because everyone talks about USB sticks being left in the parking lot. But here's a case where IBM shipped you a USB stick with some software to put onto one of your pieces of hardware. Oops, there was some malware on it because they hadn't done their job properly. And you have to deal with outgoing staff. Rogue employees, the insider threat. So make sure that you're changing credentials when people are leaving your organization so they aren't tempted to log back in and cause trouble. One other tip I'd very quickly give you before I finish. Sign up your organization for Have I Been Pwned. Don't just sign up as an individual. I'm sure most of you know what Have I Been Pwned is. What it does is they will scour the latest data breaches and tell you if you are included in it. Put your organization in it, and then you'll find out if your users may have had their details compromised as well. So you can be one step ahead of those sort of threats. Ultimately, nothing is 100% trustworthy. What we're trying to do is really manage the risk, not eliminate it. We're never going to completely destroy it. But if you put the right defenses in place, what we can do is we can protect whatever it is that your organization considers to be its crown jewels, the things you really need to prevent from happening and prevent from losing. And finally, I'd say this: hack yourself rather than waiting to be hacked. Do your penetration testing. Try and find the vulnerabilities or find an outside company which will do it for you rather than waiting for the bad guys to do it. There's lots of bad stuff going on out there, but I want to reassure you the glass is half full. You know, my job is mostly to set the scene in terms of the threats. But there's loads of good people out there who are working hard to defend businesses, lots of expertise on the computer security side as well. It's fantastic to have an event like this where you're able to get together and share knowledge and best practices with each other so that you can build more secure systems in future. We don't know how lucky we are to have events like this, and thank you for putting this on today. It's really tremendous. There are threats out there, but we can fight them by working together. We can reduce the risk and minimize the damage which can be done. Thank you very much.